Assassin's Creed Shadows just came out, so I'm here to give my first impressions and answer some common questions about the game. My name is James, and I started this channel simply because I love video games. If that sounds like you, please subscribe to my channel so that you can see more videos just like this one. I'm going to start out by giving my general thoughts and talking through how I've been playing the game so far. Then I'll have separate, dedicated sections for the dual protagonists, combat, stealth, parkour, and the mission structures. I also want to extend a huge thank you to Ubisoft for providing me the game 2 days early so that I can make this video. And with all that out of the way, let's get started. So my top level thoughts, if I had to sum it up really in just a few words, it's that I'm having a lot of fun. I've been enjoying going to the different towns and meeting the different characters and going around and finding new gear and clearing objectives and climbing up buildings and taking out guys stealthily and doing all of this stuff that comes really with every Assassin's Creed game. Most of what you love about Assassin's Creed is going to be present in this game. I'm enjoying the new stealth system, which I'll get into more later, and I think the way that the combat is presented suits this game very nicely. This game falls in line with other recent Assassin's Creed games. If you haven't liked any Assassin's Creed games since Assassin's Creed 3, this is probably not going to be the game for you. I've been playing on PS5, and I've played 16 hours over the 3 days that I've had the game. The first 15 hours of the game was Act 1, and so I've just barely started Act 2. I'm at level 17, and so far I haven't felt underleveled or overleveled for anything that I've tried to do yet. I think that 15 hours is kind of a long time to spend in Act 1. It didn't really feel like a ton of story stuff happened during that time. However, I'm doing quite a bit of side stuff as I go. I'm not clearing every single question mark that pops up, but I will stop at probably 90% of the question marks that I come across between different objectives. And I want to say that I've finished probably 75% of the side quests that have been presented to me. I'm really just playing the game to have fun at this point, and sometimes when I sit down to play, that will be stealthing around and killing as many guys as possible, but sometimes that'll be kind of inching forward in the story as well. In the opening hour, you're introduced to 11 different bad guys, and those guys are basically going to be this game's Templar Order. Although they haven't called them the Templars yet. So I assume you'll take out all 11 of those leaders probably over 4 acts. That's not to say there's only 11 assassination targets in the game. I was talking to some random dude and he was like, hey, something needs to be done about these people. And he gave me 8 additional targets that I was able to go and track down that just weren't part of the main story. Now I'm going to get into more topical points of conversation. I'm going to start out with the dual protagonists. Both of these characters were really all over the marketing for the game. However, at the point that I'm at in the game, Naue feels like the main character. At the very beginning, you do start the game playing as Yasuke, and you play as him for probably 10 minutes. And then you switch over to Naue, and you play as her until the end of Act 1, which for me means that I played only as her for a whole 15 hours. That being said, once you do have access to Yasuke, it seems like you can switch between them at will. There are some side objectives that if you try to start them as Yasuke, it won't let you, and the same goes for Naue. But for the most part, it seems like you can play as whoever. The two characters do feel distinctly different, and they have different abilities as well, but I'll talk more about each of them when we do talk about stealth, combat, and parkour later on. Another thing I think is worth mentioning is that they have a shared level. I mentioned earlier that I'm level 17 right now. Both of my characters are level 17. They level up together. So every time you go up a level, Yasuke will get an ability point and Naue will get an ability point. This should protect you against one of your characters being really high level and the other one being really low level. The biggest barrier here would probably just be your own familiarity with the other character if you have one that you play as more than the other. Next up, I want to talk about combat. Naoe's attacks are very fast and she'll do very small amounts of damage per strike. Parrying feels very important when you're playing as her, and avoiding attacks is essential. And in a way, the parry attack rhythm that you can kind of get into reminds me of the parry and kill rhythm that you would get into with some of the earlier Assassin's Creed games. Yasuke is much slower, and he pretty effortlessly just slaps around enemies. Parrying doesn't really feel that important when you're playing as Yasuke, and I could be wrong, but I think that he hits hard enough that if somebody is about to attack you and you would normally have to parry it, I think he hits hard enough that he can actually break them out of their attack. And Naoe definitely cannot do that. He can also stagger most enemies in probably like 1 to 2 hits, which as Naoe, that would take probably about 4 or 5 hits. His level of force and brutality feels much more in line with the combat from Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Last thing that I want to talk about for combat is that if you ever feel like you're just surrounded by enemies and you need to run away, running away from enemies is super easy. At least it is as Naoe. I haven't tried running away from enemies as Yasuke. The enemies in this game don't seem to climb to try to get to you. If you're on a rooftop and they see you, they'll try shooting arrows or shooting you with guns and stuff, but they won't climb up there and try to like fight you. And that can make getting away from enemies really easy. And that brings us to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is stealth. I've only gotten to play as Yasuke for about an hour, and when you first get access to him, he is pretty useless in stealth. He can hide in bushes and he can even go prone, but he can't do any kind of like stealth attacks, or he doesn't have any throwable weapons or anything like that. Naoe is fully built to be a stealth character. You have lots of tools and abilities that make stealth in this game feel new and fresh. Naoe can go prone to hide in short grass or to crawl under obstacles. You can utilize lighting to avoid detection by hiding in the dark. And you can throw objects or whistle to distract or attract enemies. In the early game, some of the stealth can be a little bit frustrating because there will be enemies that have like multiple sections on their health bars that you won't be able to stealth take out right away, not until you get some perks into those skill trees. But I would say that if that's something that's important to you, you should be able to pretty easily make that a non-issue. The next thing that I want to talk about is parkour, starting with leaps of faith. It might just be me, but I feel like I'm having a really hard time finding places to do leaps of faith, even when you're on like a viewpoint or something. If you press forward and X, they won't just like jump down and do a leap of faith, which is standard for Assassin's Creed. I've also had a bunch of times that I thought I was about to do a leap of faith only to jump off a building to my death. As far as I know, Yasuke doesn't parkour hardly at all. He can do some minimal climbing, but that's about it. Naoe is much better at climbing, and she also has a grappling hook that helps her get around a lot easier as well. They brought back the system where you have different buttons to parkour upward and parkour downward. I don't remember every game where they've had that, but I do think it works pretty well in this one, especially since I've been having such a hard time finding the leaps of faith that I'm going to be climbing off of buildings a lot. And then another thing related to the parkour or climbing is that you can't climb every single building and wall. You do need to be able to see actual things for you to grab onto. And as far as I can tell, you can only do minimal climbing and parkour in trees. The last thing that I want to talk about is the mission structure, I guess. All of your objectives, whether it's a main mission or a side quest or a random thing that you agreed to do for some guy, everything is kept on one single page that's presented to you kind of like a whiteboard. It's got lines and exclamation points going every which direction, and I like the idea of it, that it's cool to be able to see everything that you've done and everything that you have going on kind of all at the same time, but I'm not a huge fan of the actual execution. There's not a way to sort quests by how close to you they are, which is something that I like to do when I'm not really on a specific task. And finally, I've got one last little section that I wanted to put on the end here, and this is just going to be a kind of rapid fire yes or no question section. Is there naval combat? Not that I've seen. Are they actual assassins? I've seen the assassin logo, but I haven't actually heard them call themselves assassins, and nobody has called them assassins. Can you pet animals? Yes. Do you fight animals? I don't think I've fought any yet. Does the game have photo mode? Yes. And finally, do I feel like this was a step in the right direction for Assassin's Creed? Absolutely. So far. Guys, that's all that I have for today. In the comment section, please let me know what you think about Assassin's Creed Shadows so far. And if you have any questions about the game that I didn't cover in this video, leave them down there and I will do my best to get to those as well. Until next time, the best way to keep up with me is on Twitter and on Instagram at James_Solar and on Blue Sky at jamessolar.bsky.social. Thanks, guys.